This is Stephanie March, food editor of Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, and fellow foodies, it's the most wonderful time of the year, the Minnesota State Fair. And not only are foods on a stick, I'm bringing you a podcast on a stick. It's a show released daily during the run of the fair, covering the fair's best of the best, the must-eats, the new foods, the old favorites, plus events, hidden gems, and the shows you can't miss. We're going to cover it all. Just listen to Podcasts on a Stick. Find episodes on the Podcast One app or wherever you find your podcasts.
The following is a 1500 ESPN Twin Cities production.
Raised on basketball, raised in front of a computer screen, raised for covering the game, raised by wolves. Now talking all things Timberwolves with beat writer Derek James, here's Manny Hill with the Raised by Wolves podcast.
It is another edition of Raised by Wolves. Welcome. Thanks for listening once again. We always appreciate our listeners. It's just Manny with you this week. Derek taking some time off, but he'll be with us on our next episode. Fun one we got for you this week, though. You guys are going to love this guest. If you're a Timberwolves fan, you pretty much follow this guy on Twitter, and you follow all of his coverage that he gives you. Great work in the past for the Associated Press and now for The Athletic. Jonny K, Jon Krawczynski, joins the Raised by Wolves podcast this week. We're going to talk a little bit about everything with the Wolves this offseason. So much to get into with the draft and the moves they made in free agency and all the rumors surrounding Jimmy Butler and his future and the relationship between Jimmy and Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins and Tibbs and, do they need to make some changes, going into next season with how they run the offense, all of that stuff. We're going to get into all of that with Jonny K here in just a moment. I just want to take this minute, though, before we get to Jonny, to salute Lindsay Whalen on just a terrific WNBA career. I mean, we talked about it last week with Kyle Radke joining us in studio, and just how much Lindsay has meant to, not just, Minnesota basketball, but Minnesota sports in general, just everything that she's meant to this community. And I mean, she truly is one of us. I mean, if you've grown up in Minnesota, and I'm from Minnesota, I grew up in St. Paul, and getting a chance to watch Lindsay play with the Gophers and lead them to the Final Four, and and continue on into the WNBA, first with Connecticut and then obviously here with the Lynx, winning 4 championships. She's been a special player, and now she's going to continue on her post-playing career with the Gopher women's basketball team. So we've kind of been doing this already, saluting Lindsay the last couple of weeks since she made the announcement that this was going to be her last season. But now that the Lynx season is actually over, their season ended earlier this week against the LA Sparks in the first round of the playoffs. Just paying homage to Lindsay Whalen again. Just salute to Lindsay on a terrific career, Hall of Fame career, obviously, and congratulations to Lindsay on a great run in the WNBA, obviously with the Gophers, and then of course in the WNBA with the Lynx. And best of luck to Lindsay as she moves on to the coaching ranks with the Gopher women's basketball team. And Jonny K, he's going to talk a little bit about, we'll get his thoughts on Lindsay too at the end. But without further ado, my conversation with Jonny K, Jon Krawczynski of The Athletic, on everything Timberwolves. It's a good talk. Have a listen.
This is Stephanie March, food editor of Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, and fellow foodies, it's the most wonderful time of the year, the Minnesota State Fair. And not only are foods on a stick, I'm bringing you a podcast on a stick. It's a show released daily during the run of the fair, covering the fair's best of the best, the must-eats, the new foods, the old favorites, plus events, hidden gems, and the shows you can't miss. We're going to cover it all. Just listen to Podcasts on a Stick. Find episodes on the Podcast One app or wherever you find your podcasts.
He has been covering the Minnesota Timberwolves for many years, and he's been pretty tied into all the happenings of the organization for quite a long time. Previously of the Associated Press, now with The Athletic. He does great work. Jon Krawczynski joins us. Jonny K, good to talk to you. It's been a long time coming. I've always wanted to have you on the pod for the last we're going on 3 years now that we've been doing this, and it's good to finally get you on. I'm excited to chat with you, man.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me, Manny. I always listen to what you guys have to say. It's always fun listening, and so I'm honored to be welcomed into this podcast. Let's have some fun with it.
So this has been an interesting offseason for the Wolves. I mean, things have been pretty quiet for the last, month or so, but as soon as the season ended, I mean, there was just so much chatter about how everything went during the course of the year, and people, are people getting along? There's just been so much discussion and speculation about, Jimmy Butler's future. Is Cat going to sign his new deal? Trade rumors, all of this stuff. What's sort of your thought overall on all the chatter that has gone on this offseason since that last game against the Rockets ended?
Yeah, it has been interesting, Manny, because most of the chatter, as you say, and kind of the analysis around the Wolves this offseason hasn't necessarily been about the moves that they've made or, decisions that are happening, because, they've been pretty quiet. You bring in Anthony Tolliver, you re-sign Derrick Rose, you add a couple of draft picks, but in general, kind of more of the lower level moves, and not as headline grabbing as going out and getting LeBron or certainly trading for Jimmy like they did last year and all of those things. And so, in the absence of that, I think there are things that people you just need to talk about what's going on with the Timberwolves, and one thing that has quickly been established in the Tom Thibodeau regime is that it's an organization that stays quiet, that really doesn't like to get out there and say a lot, that tries to keep things close to the vest, and so that's all fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But in the absence of any real messaging that comes from the team, then you have sort of the speculation and the rumor mill that I think works overtime in those situations to try and read between the lines, to try and decipher sort of, messages that either are or aren't there. And so when, you have Karl-Anthony Towns not wanting to talk about what's going on with the team, Jimmy Butler just not being really even in the country to talk about the team, and Andrew Wiggins doing his normal kind of ghost routine in the off season, it leads people to wonder, what the heck is going on? Do these guys really like each other? Is this thing going to work long term? And so I think some of it is probably just, maybe worrying unnecessarily, but I do think that there are some chemistry issues that certainly do need to be addressed, and so that they can keep going forward. What I've said all kind of summer long is I don't think that any of the issues that they face are insurmountable. I think that with a professional approach and some frank and open conversation, they can find common ground and get moving in the right direction. But those conversations definitely do need to be had at some point, and I don't think they've happened yet this summer.
It's interesting too, because typically when there's rumors, I mean, and with the NBA especially, there's always rumors circulating about everything. I mean, on the court stuff, off the court stuff. I mean, look at what we just saw with Kawhi Leonard and, all the things that were, speculated to be going on over the course of the offseason, and then he gets traded to Toronto and that whole thing happens. But with the Wolves, it's interesting because we have all this chatter amongst media and fans and everything. And like you said, they've been very quiet, and they haven't really come out to refute anything that has been said or speculated upon. So it kind of makes you wonder, okay, what is going on? And nothing has been really refuted. So we're left on the outside, we're kind of left to think, okay, well, are we going to hear anything? Is anything going to be shut down and just said, look, no, this isn't true at all? I mean, we haven't heard anything from Tibbs, nothing from Jimmy, really. I mean, it's been a really, really interesting offseason that nobody has said anything, and we're all kind of left to continue to speculate about what's going on.
Yeah, and that's the hard part too, Manny, is like you look at it and I can understand how either Tibbs or some players or or other members of the organization might say, like, look, we can't be in the business of responding to every rumor out there and playing whack-a-mole and shooting things down. And I agree with that, absolutely. Like, you drive yourself crazy trying to trace every rumor and respond to it and nip it in the bud and things like that. But I do think that when there's kind of a constant sort of speculation and a constant sort of drumbeat in one area, in this chemistry area, that it may kind of behoove them to try and get out in front of it and say, hey, look, this is all overblown, and Jimmy and Kat have met and things are going well. We feel really good about the situation, and so they haven't done that yet. And I part of it, I think, is because there is some fire behind some of this smoke, and so when Kat has made a couple of public appearances and said, look, I do not want to talk about these issues, that means that I think that there's still some things that need to be addressed internally. And It would be easy for him to come out and say, hey, all of this is just people, worrying for no reason. And Jimmy and I are fine, and Tibbs and I are fine, and we're gonna put this thing together, and we're going in the right direction. Jimmy could throw something up on Instagram saying, I love my guys, Cat and Wiggs, and we're like brothers. And do we fight sometimes? Yeah, but
instead he's answering trolls. Instead, Jimmy's answering trolls on Instagram.
Exactly. So there's all of these things that happen, and there have been multiple opportunities for many people to come forward and say, look, this is getting overblown. We're moving in the right direction, and that hasn't happened yet. So when that doesn't happen, I think it does only fuel the angst and create more worry that there's actually some merit to some of these things. And maybe that's wrong, but that's just the way that it is right now. And the absence of a message from the organization or from the players involved fuels kind of more of that speculation.
And obviously there's been so much speculation about, off the court chemistry with this team, but I think about on the court chemistry too, in that, and you could maybe, equate that to, just having so many new moving parts coming in, Jimmy coming in, Taj coming in, Teague replacing Ricky and at the point guard spot and everything. But, I look at Jimmy and Andrew Wiggins specifically because there's always been that talk that, they're kind of similar players and that their playing style is similar. Obviously, Jimmy is a better player at this stage, but sometimes I just wonder if the on-court fit with those two is right, and if it's not, it's up to Tom Thibodeau to sort of figure out how those two guys can coexist. Because let's face it, Andrew's locked into his contract. He's going to be here. And, obviously you still have to worry about Jimmy's future. But going into this season, you have these two guys, and you got to find a way to make it work, because it seemed like with Jimmy coming in, Andrew was sort of put in a tough spot where he ended up regressing a little bit, especially on the offensive end. And now Tibbs has got to figure out how to get those two guys to coexist to their maximum potential.
Yeah, and I think you hit part of it was all the newness of it and trying to figure each other out for sure. And the other part of it, Manny, is that the Wiggins and Butler, their games are so similar.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, I think the Wolves would hope that long term, over the next 4 to 5 years, that Andrew Wiggins really develops into the next Jimmy Butler 2.0, because they both kind of are more mid-range guys with their jumpers. They're not great three-point shooters. They like to go into the post. They like to bang and get to the free throw line. Obviously Jimmy is a light years better defender right now than Wiggins, but I think the hope is that Wiggins eventually becomes a quality defensive player and a good perimeter stopper. And And so, sometimes it kind of feels like they're tripping over each other a little bit offensively rather than complementing each other just because of the stark similarities in their games. And now I do think that they can figure some things out, and that the longer they play together, you can iron some of those wrinkles out because they do have talent. There's no question about it. It's just trying to tinker and tweak and figure out how you get both of them to be comfortable working within the offense that you're running, and so that they don't get into the thing of, okay, now it's Jimmy's turn, now it's Wig's turn, now it's Jimmy Wig, and they play off of each other and play together rather than kind of getting in each other's way a little bit. And I think there was some of that was going on last year to a certain degree, and definitely one of the goals going into this year should be to find a little more symmetry and find a little bit of a way that they can help each other a little bit more and not feel like they're both more in each other's way.
Do they need to pick up the pace of play a little bit? Because I know they were kind of in the bottom third of the league in terms of pace. It seems like when you have a team that's this talented and this athletic, especially when you consider how athletic Wiggins is and how quick Teague can be, and Jimmy obviously is superior athletically as well. Sometimes I wonder if you watch the way they play offensively, if they need to speed things up a little bit, so where you get to a point where Andrew isn't thinking so much or Karl isn't thinking so much, that they just play a little bit and get in more of a free-flowing offense instead of things just being so stagnant sometimes and guys just sort of playing so much isolation basketball. I just wonder if speeding things up a little bit, picking up the pace, will help, everybody involved.
Well, certainly that's one thing that we heard from Jeff Teague, especially in the playoffs last year, was he wanted to get up and go a little bit more. And I do think that would cater to Wiggins' game in terms of getting him some easy transition buckets. Now, the one thing that you have to acknowledge in trying to do that is Andrew isn't the guy who runs the floor relentlessly. He's not Clint Capella sprinting up and down. He's kind of a floater a lot in transition. And so if he were more aggressive and attacking, that when they get out in the open floor, he takes the ball, goes right to the basket and gets there quickly, I think that would be easier to do. But I do think that Andrew's reluctance in that area hamstrings them a little bit in trying to do that. And also, let's face it, Jeff Teague has never been a guy who has been a trigger man on a frenetic offense. A lot of the time, a lot of those Atlanta Hawks teams just ran beautiful half-court sets and moved the ball and shared it and all those things, but they weren't a huge transition team. And so that hasn't always been a strength of his game, despite his quickness and despite his ability to get in the passing lanes for steals and things like that. But, the third component of that is the starters played so many minutes that they're tired. They want to walk the ball up a little bit more, too, to conserve their energy if they're playing 38 or 40 minutes a night. And so if this kind of new look second unit and new look bench that the Wolves are going to have going into next season, if Tibbs can trust them a little more and if they play better and earn more minutes and, bring those numbers of the starters down into the low to mid 30s, I think that could help the starters feel like they could cut it loose a little bit more when they are on the court, because they are going to get the rest that they need to catch their breath and still come back fresh for the fourth quarter.
And on that too, to piggyback off of that, just with the bench, I mean, Tibbs obviously has the reputation of playing his starters heavy minutes, and I just look at what they have on the bench now. I mean, you're thinking of Tolliver, you're thinking of, you got Derrick Rose coming back. You've drafted two guys. Now there's development that needs to happen there with, Okogie and Bates-Diop, but you have them, and they're talented. And for me, I just look at Tibbs and say, okay, and I've been saying this for months, you look at all the teams in the NBA that are contending and championship caliber teams, they find guys late in the draft, free agency, they find ways to utilize these guys to the best that they possibly can, and they don't have to, and Golden State is kind of an unfair example because they're arguably like the greatest team ever, like the greatest collection of talent ever. But, I look at a Draymond Green who was a second-round pick, and I say, okay, we don't need Keita Bates-Diop to be Draymond Green, but they need him to be a contributor. They need him to be a part of the team's long-term future, because that's how you get to be the Warriors, because you find hidden gems in the later rounds of drafts and guys that come out of nowhere in free agency that you pick up. And I just wonder if Tibbs is a guy that can find that and can utilize a guy that, kind of comes out of nowhere and say, wow, where the hell did that guy come from, type of thing,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially, Manny, when you're paying Andrew Wiggins max, when you're trying to pay Karl-Anthony Towns max, when you're trying to pay Jimmy Butler, like, you have to get the affordable labor that comes late in first rounds and into second rounds and get them locked in for a few years, just so you can have viable alternatives that are not just journeyman vet minimum guys. And so it is crucial. Now, the early returns, even though it is very, very early, the early returns on Okogie and Bates-Diop are two guys that they look the part. They look like guys who can come in and help a little bit. I mean, they're not going to carry a team, but they should be able to contribute to some kind of level. So, and they both are built for this modern game. That Tibbs should have some more options at his disposal going into next season. And then you look at the way that their wing depth kind of shakes out now compared to last year. And I mean, you have Okogie, you have Derrick Rose, as long as he stays healthy. You have Keita, who can play probably the 3 or the 4. Then you bring in a guy like Nunnally, who 6'7", can play the 2 or the 3. It just seems like, they have a few more pieces there that look to be more of where this modern game is going. Guard multiple positions, get up and down, try and get into you defensively a little bit. And so it's up to the coaching staff to develop them and to make sure that they put those guys in the right positions to succeed. But I do think that even though, Tolliver as well, even though they're not like marquee signings, they're not lottery picks, it does seem like you can see a pathway for the Wolves' second unit to be more viable this year, just given how some of the pieces seem to fit where they may not have the last couple of years.
When and your best guess, when do we see a Karl-Anthony Towns extension get done?
Yeah, I think we're, watch me hang up the phone and it happens, but I think we're still a little ways away, Manny. I think last year Wiggins took it right up to training camp, and I could see a similar scenario play out here, or at least into September. I think that we need guys to start coming around here and start working out, and that'll probably be closer to September as well. And getting, eyeballs in front of eyeballs and having conversations in person rather than texting or phoning or things like that. And that'll start to get the ball rolling a little bit. Kat has said rather kind of vaguely in the couple times that we've talked this summer, like, we know there are things to talk about. And so we can only infer what some of those things might be. But I do think that he wants to exert a little bit of leverage here, a little bit of him, kind of letting people know that, okay, I want to talk about some things. Everything isn't perfect here, and here are some of my concerns, and and I'm going to use this as my way of kind of stringing it along a little bit and letting people know that I think that there are some things that need to be addressed. And so until that happens in person, I would think that, we're not going to see any ink on paper. I still do think that eventually, I know the Timberwolves internally feel like, yeah, this is going to happen. It's just going to take some time, and they're just going to have to kind of go through the process here. And Karl is going to kind of, let them twist a little bit right now, because he feels like that there are some issues that he that he wants to have a little bit of a say in, and we'll see if that happens or not. But long story short, I do think we're still a little ways away from it. I don't think anything is imminent on that front.
Because the money isn't really the issue here, right? I mean,
No.
He's going to get the max. I mean, that's
Right.
I mean, he's going to get it, and he's worth it. But it's just a matter of just having those conversations that he seems to want to have, right?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, yeah, the Timberwolves are going to offer him that money and all of it, and so then it comes down to, okay, you say you value me like this. Now let's talk about some things and give me sort of a little bit of a voice to at least air my concerns, like a player who is a max player is afforded in most organizations. And, you can, again, only speculating, but is it the Vince LaGarza firing? Is it, sort of the chemistry issues with Jimmy or with Tibbs, or is it the way that he's being used offensively or defensively? I don't know that personally. He hasn't said that, but
Right.
Again, in the absence of any kind of concrete evidence, we have to kind of look at, okay, what might he be upset with, or what might he want to address? And those are some things that come to mind that that certainly would make sense for them to have those kinds of conversations, and him to kind of air his side of the situation before he locks in for 5 years and $180 million or whatever it'll end up being.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Lindsay Whalen. We had Kyle Radke in. We pretty much talked all things Lindsay in the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know you did a piece on her this week in The Athletic. I mean, Royce's going to listen to this and he's going to yell at me for using this word, but what an iconic figure in Minnesota sports, right? I mean, you just can't. What else is there to say about Lindsay? She's just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's done everything you could possibly do and to leave her mark, not only on the court, but off of it as well. I mean, how influential she has been in opening up doors for girls and women to play in sports, in this area, and really to make women's sports viable and popular and make it a cool thing. It wasn't that case before Lindsay Whalen arrived at the U of M and then came back to the Lynx. And so I don't think it's hyperbole to say that if you're going to make a Mount Rushmore of most influential Minnesota-born athletes, she's on it. Without a question. And then if you even want to broaden it out to just straight athletes to play in Minnesota sports,
Right.
She's right up near the top with all that she's won, with the programs that she's built, both with the Gophers and the Lynx, and then the ambassador that she has been. There won't be another one that comes along like her, for a long, long time, if ever. I mean, that's just how much she's meant to this entire region, and she deserves all of the accolades that she's getting right now. And it'll be tough to see her walk off the court for the last time, whenever that is. But then to see her go and coach the University of Minnesota again, and I mean all that, it's amazing. There have not been many athletes that have kind of gone through the journey that she's gone through and been as successful as she's been. She's one of a kind.
Yeah, I've been thinking this all week about just how bittersweet it's going to be as, whenever this Lynx season ends, that, thinking about next year watching the Lynx and not seeing her on the court playing for the Lynx. But at the same time, just the level of excitement for Gopher women's basketball now with her at the helm is just, it's going to be off the charts. It's going to be incredible.
For sure, and it is a program that needed that boost.
Yeah.
They've kind of hit a lull for a few years now, and so they need an injection of energy and of name recognition and of the intensity and everything that she's going to bring. And I do think she's going to have to go through a big learning curve as a coach, and she may not. She may stumble early while she's getting the hang of it and understanding all of the nuances that go into coaching and recruiting and managing a game and doing all of those things. But I think, already the sort of elevation that she has brought to that program is worth the price of admission as is. And then you just hope that, and you figure and you bet that she's going to grow in that position, and 3 years from now is going to be just light years ahead of where she is going to be this first season as a coach, and the potential there of her building something really strong and really stable, I think is pretty high.
You all know where to find him, at Jon Krawczynski on Twitter. Follow all of his work on The Athletic, covering the Timberwolves and the NBA and the Minnesota Vikings as well. Jonny K, great having you on. Good talk, man. I'll catch up with you soon.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. We'll do it again.
This is Stephanie March, food editor of Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine, and fellow foodies, it's the most wonderful time of the year, the Minnesota State Fair. And not only are foods on a stick, I'm bringing you a podcast on a stick. It's a show released daily during the run of the fair, covering the fair's best of the best, the must-eats, the new foods, the old favorites, plus events, hidden gems, and the shows you can't miss. We're going to cover it all. Just listen to Podcasts on a Stick. Find episodes on the Podcast One app or wherever you find your podcasts.
I'm Rita Foley with an AP News Minute. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis was there to greet the McCain family last night as Senator and war hero John McCain's body was flown to a military base outside Washington. Today, McCain's body will lie in state under the Capitol Rotunda. AP Washington correspondent Sagar Magani.
After a memorial service yesterday in his adopted home of Arizona, a military jet flew McCain's body east to Joint Base Andrews, where he was greeted with an Armed Forces tribute. He's now lying in state at the U.S. Capitol, where he's served for so many years, and where the public will be allowed to file in on what's expected to be a stormy day here in Washington. McCain will be buried Sunday.
Ariana Grande and Stevie Wonder will sing, and former President Clinton will speak at Aretha Franklin's funeral today in Detroit. But organizers promise this will be a service, not a show. An American man's pleaded not guilty to assault in Uganda after video footage showed him punching a hotel worker. I'm Rita Foley.